Hello, and welcome to your Pointers for Parents podcast, where we support parents with anxiety related to teens transitioning out of the home after high school, whether heading off to the college campus, the military base, or simply residential interdependence. Listen, you all already know I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Lloyd, and I'm so excited that you all are here with us today. I am going to introduce our special guest. Her name is Leslie Rose. So listen, lean in so I can tell you just a little bit about her. She is the founder of Leslie Rose Coaching, a health and life coaching practice for teens and young adults, and founder and host of Healthy Teen Life Podcast. With a nutrition certification in hand, Leslie guides transformative change with youth faced with low self-esteem that develops into disordered eating and body anxiety. By taking a unique, holistic approach that addresses both body and mind, she's able to help young people build self-awareness, uncover the root of their challenge, and develop positive action. When she's not coaching, blogging, or podcasting, she can be found walking her dogs or doing downward dogs in her practice of yoga and inner peace. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Leslie, for being here. We welcome you. We welcome you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk and share with everyone.
Awesome. So glad you're here. Tell me this, Leslie, before we even jump into any of the questions. Do you have a favorite book that you have found to be profound? And if so, if you'll share that with us, please.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's a good question. I would have to say Man's Search for Meaning, which is by Viktor Frankl. And it's about his time as a prisoner of war during the World War II. And he spent time in 4 different Nazi camps. And what he began to observe and discover about how people cope with life's challenges, like they were all going through in these camps, he started to pay attention to that and think about like who survived, who didn't. And of course, those were extreme situations. But what he found was through his continued research, both, there and then afterwards, was that people who survive and persevere are the ones who find meaning in their situation and move forward with purpose. And so he believed that when we have meaning in our lives, it gives us the drive to keep going and live life well. So that really resonated with me. And it's something that since reading that, I tried to keep that in mind with how I lead my life. And it's actually ended up being a big reason why I changed careers from early on career of marketing work that I was doing and working with brands that I just wasn't fully engaged in, or I didn't feel like it was my message to sell or to tell. And so I switched and I started working with teens who are struggling in their phase of life, so that hopefully I could give them a chance to live a happy and healthy life. So it really has kind of followed me in my career and in my life. And so for that reason, it was a very profound book.
Absolutely. I so just enjoyed just listening to your insight as it related to that book. And it does. I mean, you have a purpose, and it almost helps to wake you up in the morning in a good mood because you're already thinking about, how can I, and based on whatever you're doing, how can I help someone today? Or how can I, tweak these strategies in order to make sure that this is more meaningful? It does make us think and helps us hit the ground running. So I totally concur.
Yeah. And I think it's no matter what phase of life you're in, having a purpose and having some goals makes such a difference.
You're absolutely right about that. And so a morning routine, would you say that you have a morning routine that you've stuck with for a number of years?
I do.
Awesome.
One of my first things that I do is no devices. So I get up and I don't go to my phone right away. I try to skip that, as tempting as it definitely can be. I don't watch news in the morning. So I just like to get in the natural light, get some sunlight, and kind of get my circadian rhythm going. It's something that I've learned from the work that I do and all of my training, that it really does help you to get your whole metabolism and your whole body going for the day. And then I'll have a little cup of coffee with some cinnamon, and I make it kind of a treat for myself. And then what I like to do is just run through my plans for the day. and get my mindset in the right place. Like, okay, what do I need to accomplish? What are my three main things that I need to tackle today? And of course, there's a long list of other things, but I try to focus on some of the majors.
Mhm.
And if I already have that figured out, then I might do like a 5-minute quick journal or a gratitude journal or something like that. But I always try to do something to kind of set my day so that I'm in that positive mindset and I'm ready to
Mhm.
go and I'm kind of organized. And then I go for a walk with my dogs, or I do my yoga and
Mm.
get outdoors, or I'm doing my yoga and kind of, stretching my body and just getting some physical activity and getting the blood flow. And then I'm ready to start my day. So
Awesome,
it's a bit of a
awesome,
routine, but it's very enjoyable. And so it sets me up for success.
awesome. I can totally picture, just that getting that thought process and that mindset focused. And it takes different types of activities in order to make that happen. Would you say that the morning routine typically takes, I don't know, maybe about an hour or an hour and a half, somewhere around there?
For me, it's about an hour and a half because I like to go on long walks with my dogs.
Ah,
So I get up pretty early, so I'm able to do that. It doesn't, cut in too much into my day. So yeah, yeah. So for me, it is a little bit longer, but I definitely, if I didn't need to or want to walk my dogs as long as an hour, then I would be a little bit shorter. So it's
sure.
just something I really enjoy, and I want to get that exercise.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
I think an hour and a half is just great timing. So good for you.
yeah,
I want
yeah.
to go back, Leslie, to a little bit of your introduction because in the introduction, it talked about, the whole eating disorder and just your area of expertise as it relates to that,
Mhm.
self-awareness and just getting down to the and uncovering the root of teens' challenges. And so I am curious to know why do some teens struggle with their weight while on the college campus? Why is that such a struggle, you believe?
Mm. You know, there can be a variety of reasons. There's some that are more common than others. I think there's a few things. So eating independently for the first time, that
Mm,
they have so many choices in front of them, and they can eat whenever and wherever they want. That like sometimes it's almost like a free for all, right? It's kind of exciting. You get in the dining hall, and they're often pretty large, and there's so many choices, and so you're loading up your plate, and you're probably eating more than you might at home, and they're also eating at random times, when they can get food, and they're eating with friends late at night oftentimes. So their habits have shifted. Maybe the amounts and the types of food that they're eating have shifted. And so that can contribute to weight gain. They may not be exercising as much as they normally do. That depends. I mean,
mm,
some kids start exercising and other ones, they're not. They're sitting and studying. I think the second thing is that there are teens who don't eat. So, kind of the opposite
mhm,
is, there's some that it's kind of they're like, oh, there's so much food here. And then for other teens, it's a stressful time, or they get busy or they forget. And so they're not eating and they're just kind of grabbing a bite here or there. And many students with ADHD, this is not uncommon, they forget to eat. They're busy, they're distracted, they're, focused on other things. And
mhm,
so their bandwidth is, maybe focused on just getting through the day and staying organized and those sorts of things. And so they're forgetting to eat. And then by the time they realize that they're hungry, it's the end of the day and they're
mm,
starving. And so they just eat a whole bunch. So that can be a challenge or a situation that comes up. And then the third one is drinking. Some
mm.
students end up drinking frequently or considerable amounts. And, over time that can add up and cause weight gain. So it really depends on the individual. And I think what I recommend to parents is that they do two things to help their students and set them up for success. And one is teach them to choose healthy choices or make healthy choices and make food selections that really fuel them with good energy throughout the day. And this is not necessarily intuitive. As a parent, you may have been doing that at home. You may have been making those meals and doing it. but sometimes it's something that you literally need to teach your kids and talk about the choices and why these are, certain food selections are more optimal than others, that they're healthier, and, providing sustained energy and things like that. So if you're a parent who makes all their meals while they're in school, like in high school, middle school, and all their meals and snacks, start transitioning now before they go to college. Start having them make choices and talk about what's healthy for their bodies. That can really go a long way, because then once they get off to college, they really have a better understanding, and it's more natural. And so they know, okay, I'm in this big dining hall. Well, I know having that burger and fries and a shake every day is probably not going to be the best thing. So let me manage this. And sometimes I'll have that, but I'll also hit the salad bar and choose some healthy ingredients, or, find some other foods like that.
Sure.
Second, yeah. And then I think the second thing is that parents can do is teach them to shop and cook for themselves. So after their first year, and even if they are eating at the dining hall, these skills are still important, because the dining hall is like shopping, right? They go in there, they see all this stuff, and they're making selections. So as they walk around and make decisions about what they'll be selecting to eat, it's much like a grocery store. And you want your child to be able to be a wise consumer and choose for their health over their eyes, right? Or maybe they're a super hungry stomach at a moment, and go for, something that's just more indulgent. And the second part of this is they'll likely have situations where they'll need to cook on their own, like maybe on the weekend, or their second or third year in college when they start to move out and move into an apartment or something. So, my daughter is in her junior year of college, and she has 4 roommates, and she cooks, but she's the only one. All her roommates get takeout orders or delivery, or they buy pre-made meals, and all of which are highly processed with added sugars, sodium, unhealthy fats, healthy foods, with making good choices, with weight gain and potentially even disordered eating. So that would be my recommendation.
Absolutely. And those are phenomenal recommendations. And would you say, Leslie, that really in parenting our children, really the earlier, the better, in reference to teaching these good, healthy choices? But by all intents and purposes, if we have yet to do it, it's still not too late.
True. Oh, very true. Them learning early, they were able to start to build those skills. But it's certainly never too late to get your children to start doing those sorts of things, like making their own lunch or their own snacks, or participating in making choices for dinner and what are we going to have, and starting to teach them. All of that can happen in middle school, high school.
Fantastic. And even when the teen, and I'm just kind of picturing before these teens even go off to the college campus, it's almost like, they get to a point where they start driving, and it sure would be, I think would be good practice if they were to create the grocery list, maybe show it to mom or dad, and then, here are the dollars, here's the card. Okay, so that triggered in my mind as you talked about in the cafeteria on the campus, and all these choices, and you're shopping in reference to there being, you're shopping for your health as opposed to just what your eyes desire. Shopping even before going to the grocery store, I mean, that could be ideal too. Almost like a domestic maintenance type of approach.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Getting them involved in that shopping and making that list, and sending them off to go do the shopping, and having a budget. All of those things are great skills to learn early on, so that you're setting them up for success, and that it's not going to be a stressful situation for them once they move away.
No, I totally agree. So tell me, what are some of the most common signs of a teen's eating disorder? And then how does this disorder affect the teens and eventually impact their academics while away? Because here it is, we have this eating, but they've gone to just really, lean into their studies. I mean, there has to be some type of... You're listening to Your Pointers for Parents podcast, where we support parents with anxiety as it relates to teens transitioning out of the home after high school. To get additional tips tossed and or gems dropped, subscribe to our weekly emails by clicking on the link below. Now back to your Pointers for Parents podcast. Of connection here, whereas one could possibly affect the other. What are your thoughts, Leslie?
Yeah, they absolutely can. Eating disorders are tricky because they infiltrate your whole life, and it can become overwhelming. Probably the most common signs are in eating patterns where they either have difficulty controlling their eating behaviors, like in the case of frequent binge eating, emotional eating, or bulimia, where they feel a little bit out of control and they feel like they, don't know why they're doing it and they don't feel like they can stop. On the other side is the over control, where they're eating in the sense that they're counting calories, they're cutting out food groups, they're restricting meals, or in orthorexia, where they're obsessed with eating healthy food and the nutritional value of everything. And so they're counting and weighing and checking and, becoming obsessive about their food. And so what happens with either types of case is that their behaviors are negatively impacted, right? It affects their life because it starts to take over. They start to avoid eating with other people or hiding their behaviors. And so they start to feel guilty. They are hyper aware of it. They start to feel bad about themselves. They think about their eating all the time, planning what they will or won't do. And it really increases their anxiety levels, and it makes it difficult for them to enjoy their time whenever they're around food, because that becomes their focal point. And then the other part is the physiological effect. So the nutrient loss, the lack of the quality of food as fuel, right? We need some good food to fuel us. And then it affects their gut health, their blood sugar balance, their energy levels. I mean, it can go on and on. It depends on how extreme their eating behaviors are, but it can really affect them physiologically. And then that's where it gets into the academics. It's not uncommon for it to affect their sleep and their social interactions and then their academics. And in terms of the academics, it can impact because they're experiencing brain fog, right? They're not getting good nutrients, they're not eating enough, or they're eating unhealthily, right? So their blood sugar is off, and so they're getting this brain fog, or they're not getting nutrients, and so they're getting brain fog, and they're having difficulty focusing in class. Their memory retention is decreased. So all of this is researched, and there's factual studies on this as to what happens when you're not getting a proper diet. And it's not uncommon for grades to start slipping as a result. So while it seems like it could be an isolated thing, like, oh, my child's not eating so well right now, I'm worried because they're skipping meals. Well, it does have magnifying effect. It starts to radiate out from there, and it does affect other parts of their lives, and definitely can affect academics. Athletics, if they don't have energy, then it affects their athletic performance. So it affects them in quite a few ways.
So getting a close handle on this as early as possible, just so that it avoids this rippling effect in all of the areas you just mentioned, is essential.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you're here. That was a plethora of information. I know that our listeners will be holding on to that just so that they can pay attention to the signs, and then, of course, make sure that they're doing what they need to do in order to make sure their teens are in the best possible position available. So just to shift just a little bit, can you share the mindset needed by teens in order to make the necessary changes? Because changes, if they're in a situation as such, then a change needs to be made. And so what mindset is needed, please, Leslie?
Yeah. I would say, if a parent notices some of these challenges with their teenager, with their eating, or their college student, to, obviously, as you just said, do something about it as soon as possible, because disordered eating, which is, some of the early behaviors of just eating abnormally, right? That can turn into an eating disorder like anorexia and bulimia and so forth. So what you want to do is jump on it. But the second part of that, and to address your question, is first, teenager, the individual, the child, has to deeply want to make the change. It's not easy to overcome eating behaviors once they're defined. So they have to be willing to face their beliefs about themselves and work through the pain of it, because it's not an easy thing. These eating behaviors develop not because they can't control themselves or because they're lazy and they just want to eat whatever. It's because they're dealing with other challenges in their lives and the beliefs about themselves and feelings about themselves. Teenage years are, I mean, as we all know, is such a change in life, and there's so much happening for them, and they feel much more aware of themselves, and they want to fit in, and they want to be a certain way, what they're seeing around them. So it can really impact and their feelings about themselves that can create some of these behaviors. So the different reasons for disordered eating really develop, differently for each child. It's not a one size fits all situation, but at the core, there's a couple things. And that's, as I said, the relationship with themselves, their self-esteem and their acceptance of themselves and their body. And then the second thing is their relationship with food, and learning that food is nourishment, healthy living, and not a control mechanism or punishment to achieve a certain body ideal that honestly is not realistic. The body ideal that we see in social media, on TV, in advertisements can really realistically only be achieved by about 4% of the entire population. So that, we all have different bodies, and it's driven by a number of reasons, anything from genetics to lifestyle. But to try to achieve this body ideal, very difficult. And for most people, is not achievable. But teenagers don't understand this, and they often kind of fall into that trap. So that's what often will happen, is their mindset, in order to be able to make change, is they have to want to make change. They have to realize that what they've been doing with their eating, with their behaviors, with their self-judgment isn't healthy, and that they want to make change. Because, and we all know, if we try to get our teenager to do something and they don't want to do it, well, good luck. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so, what I find to be very, very interested in youth, in the latter part, the last probably half of your response moments ago, I continue to hear self-awareness, self-esteem, a relationship with self. It really does have to do with self. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it goes back to that whole thinking. What am I thinking about myself? And as parents, we can have we can believe so much for and about our teens, but it's all about what they are believing about themselves. And that, I really find that to be interesting. Oh my goodness, you're so right about that.
Yeah.
So what are 3 tips that can help teens live their healthiest life, their absolute healthiest? What do you say?
Great question. I would say, number one, don't compare ever. Don't compare. Theodore Roosevelt is the thief of joy. And I couldn't agree more. It really is. I mean, when you find yourself comparing is when you start to despair, right? The compare and despair situation. And I know that it's extremely hard in today's social and media driven world for our teenagers and our youth, but it's so important that they not get caught up in the unrealistic images that they're faced with, and to be at peace with who they are. Everyone is different. And in my opinion, that's beautiful. Comparing only damages. So what I would say to a teenager is, instead of focusing on that, focus on developing yourself into who you want to be for yourself, and not to please anyone else, right? Because most of the time when we're comparing, we then want to please other people. We want to be that thing that we're comparing ourselves to. And we're getting sad because we're not that person or that ideal. And so this is one time to focus on you in a positive way of doing it for yourself and what makes you happy and brings you joy. So, doing what they're passionate about, what they believe in, and do that, and they'll be the person other people want to be. That other people will look to them if they're doing what they believe in and what they love and they enjoy, it's going to show and it's going to radiate outwards.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely don't compare. Love yourself for who you are, and that's pretty special. And then the second piece of advice I'd say is practice balance. Balance and moderation is everything in living a healthy life. If we go to an extreme, then that's not balanced and it's not healthy. So, eating healthy daily, but also allowing a treat from time to time, not trying to be so restricted that it's all or nothing. Eat a mostly natural, whole plant based diet or plant focused diet. Don't deprive, and I like to use, like, just to help me visualize it, is the 90-10 rule. So 90% of the time, I'm eating healthy. Some people like 80-20%, and that's fine too. But 90% of the time, I'm eating healthy. I'm eating plants, whole foods, as natural as I can. 10% of the time, I indulge. I have fun and I enjoy it without regret or guilt because I know that other 90% of the time, I'm doing great, right? And the other part of practicing balance is getting daily exercise, quality sleep, managing stress. So when you cut corners on these, your body and your brain suffer the consequences. So practicing balance in those areas. And then for academics and sports and other activities, do them, but don't overdo it. Have fun and achieve, but have limits too. I mean, so often these days, there's this pressure to perform on every level, to be the best, to achieve the best, to get the best, get into the best schools, right? It's an overwhelming pressure for young people. And I see it when I work with them. So I often see teens completely burning out before they hit college, either checking out by quitting everything or developing anxiety or depression. And so this overdoing of things can't be sustained long term, and they burn out. So practice balance and you'll be able to keep life progressing comfortably and feeling good. And then the third piece of advice I'd give is take the long view. The teen years can be really hard, but keeping your sight in a positive forward direction will help you get through it. It's a temporary time in their life, but a foundational one that establishes their direction into adulthood. So enjoying all the small joys along the way rather than focusing on the past or on mistakes. And that's often what teens will do. They, because they are worried about everyone else around them and making mistakes and being embarrassed and things like that, it can bring them down. But that's why I say take the long view. Taking the long view will help with a growth mindset that keeps them from kind of that despairing, but it keeps them willing to take on new challenges as a way to grow versus as a problem or a failure. So failure is just learning. It's not wrong or bad. So taking the long view of where you want to go and who you want to be, and it'll guide you through any tough time. So that's another one that I'd like to talk to them about and have them try to shift their perspective and not be so focused on either the past and things they felt like they did wrong or the moment where they feel like, oh, this is so bad for me. Well, let's look forward. What's on the future for you? Who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And that can lead you through some tough times.
I love that perspective, taking that long view approach. I think, or let me ask you this, do you think that that could help to disturb or could help a teen to avoid ruminating thoughts about a failure or a mistake? Because sometimes we have a tendency to get stuck and then we sit in that for a minute. Whereas, yes, as you just mentioned, taking that approach, looking down the road can help to move you forward quicker. I think that's what you're communicating. Perfect.
Right. Yeah, it definitely can. And the rumination, that's a good point, rumination is just repeating, right? It's going over the same thing over and over and over. And that long view does help you to move out of that and move from that stuck zone into that growth zone. And realizing that by ruminating, you're not progressing. And that what may have happened in the past doesn't necessarily need to happen in the future, that you can change. And so those are important things to keep in mind. And that's kind of part of that long view.
Absolutely. And so, such good tips dropped for sure. Any additional advice you'd like to share with our listeners, Leslie, as we conclude?
Oh, I think the only other thing I'd say is, for parents, encourage your teens to just enjoy their teen years
Hmm.
as much as possible and be careful about pushing them too much to overachieve. I know that, that's a big drive of, as I had said earlier, getting in the best schools and being the most successful, the top athlete and those sorts of things. But what we also want for our children, besides them being successful in their lives, is we want our children to be happy.
Hmm.
And so just making sure that we're focused on that they're getting enjoyment out of their life and what they're doing. And if they are in a bunch of activities, do they love them? Are they having fun? Or is it becoming overwhelming and stressful?
Mm.
And can changes be made to maybe eliminate something that really isn't necessary in the long run, and making their lives more enjoyable and happy. So
Hmm.
that's something that I would say is that if you do find your teen is struggling with eating, with self-worth, with self-esteem or negative mindset, and then don't hesitate. Get some help for them now, because this is going to set them up for the rest of their life. What they establish in their teen years can stay with them for their entire adult life. So getting them help early on
Hmm.
and making those changes is the best thing. It's the best gift that you could give to them.
I totally agree. Your contact information, if there's a website or a handle, whereas in the event individuals have or couples have questions they'd like to ask you, Leslie, if you can share that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Leslie Rose Coaching. And my website is leslierosecoaching.com. And if you want to reach me, you can DM me on either social platform, or I have a contact form on my website. It's just forward leslierosecoaching.com/contact. And you can reach me through that also. And would love to help anyone that is, interested.
Awesome, Leslie. Thank you so very much. And you dropped so many gems. I absolutely loved it. I was jotting and taking notes myself in reference to making sure that the parents, if you will, teach them to make healthy choices, and also, and that it's never too late. And also, when they're on the college campus in the cafeteria, to make sure that they're shopping and looking for those foods that are good for their health, as opposed to
Yeah.
all of those that are they're focused on just desiring, as far as looking at them with their eyes. And then also knowing that another key point you said, that eating, I mean, that can help, that can hinder, or that can hurt us physically,
Mhm.
physiologically, socially, academically. And so we want to make sure that we're doing our absolute best. And then also having the
Yeah.
belief about ourselves, that is positive and that is admirable, and all of those great things, as opposed to having belief that maybe we're unable to, or we're less than. So that's so very important. And so I want to thank you for being here with us today. This was so helpful. I know many listeners will have an opportunity to just process and ponder what they've heard, and hopefully apply it to their daily living as they're interacting with their teens. I know teens will be graduating and going off in August, and I know that some of these pointers can be used. So for our listeners,
Mhm.
I know you all were excited about the information today. We are on Instagram, of course, at Pointers for Parents Podcast, where you can hear this clip over and over again, and be able to reach out to Leslie. And if you have a question that you'd like us to entertain on our podcast, just drop it in the DM on our Instagram, and then of course we'll make sure that we can respond to those questions. Other than that, Leslie, thank you again so very much. We appreciate you. All the best, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it very much, and happy Thanksgiving to you too.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Take care. Goodbye. Pointers for Parents podcast. Dr. Michelle Lloyd, and I'm going to be your host today. And joining us on today's episode is none other than Karen Cooper. I am absolutely excited that she is here. After years of feeling as just skeptical on this never-ending diet hamster wheel, Karen decided to say yes to better health. Karen, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your presence.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Did you experience, when you took your daughter off to the college campus, any type of emptiness or grief? And if so, like what mindset-centered strategies did you practice to overcome, Karen?
The interesting thing about the mindset portion of this conversation is that I wasn't ensconced in a lot of mindset work until about a year or so after we dropped her off. So that's what's very interesting about this. But I will say this, my daughter just graduated in May. So she started college in the fall of 19. So for my story is that I knew that it was going to be a great experience for her. And so I knew her going away and going to the college that she went to was exactly what she needed. So I think that was part of what really helped me. Let me backtrack a little bit. I went on all the college tours with her. So when we went looking at colleges and things like that, I was the one who went with her. So I think part of the piece is honestly going with them and seeing their face and experiencing it for yourself. I also didn't go away to college. I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to Brooklyn College. So that whole experience was really fun for me because I never did it, but also through the lens of my child. So having that experience with my child really helped me in dropping her off because there was no doubt in my mind that this was going to be amazing for her.